Everybody, this is Perch. It's 2023, and I think as we look into this year, one of the questions on people's minds is what happens with DC and Marvel? So, DC, in sense of their business. Now, for what it's worth, kind of table stakes conversation. So, both companies are cash flow positive. And maybe, I've said both companies are profitable. Apparently, it's got under some people's skin. I don't know why exactly, because it's just a fact of life more than anything. But regardless, both companies are profitable. Now, they're not making a ton of money. They're not making as much as I think many people believe they should, given the current popularity of graphic novels, manga, the movies, everything else that's going on. We should see more money coming out of comics. I think unrealized income. But we're not. And DC's been kind of under a cloud of is the company going to self-destruct? What's going to happen? Will the ownership, what's going to happen with the new ownership and what's going to happen with the next new ownership and so on? Various members of the company seem confused. We saw, Daniel Cherry kind of take off, and Didio fired. We've seen a lot of kind of big moves. By the way, one of the interesting videos to do at some point is why was Didio fired exactly? Because the part of it that's puzzling is that Didio was arguably who's paying attention to comics to the point where they needed to fire Didio. If you go with the premise, and I think it's a fair one, that nobody's really paying attention to comics right now, then why were they paying attention enough to fire Didio? But regardless. That's been kind of the question in people's minds: what's going to happen to DC? Is it going to stabilize? Is it going to finally get to a place where, it's able to kind of push forward and make some progress? And then with Marvel's just kind of flown under the radar for quite a long time, where people are just, it's nobody thinks they're doing great. The content that's coming out isn't exactly making everybody excited, but there are also no big rumblings that changes are going to come anytime soon. The last time anything really happened was when Axel Lanzo was removed, CB Cebulski came in, then Kevin Feige was put over the comic division, or rather Marvel Comics kind of rolled up under him. That's it. That's been the action that we've got. So this mail is asking basically, so what will it take for corporate to notice? And the mail says, hey, Perch, there's this ongoing view from a lot of YouTubers that this is the year that David Zaslav purges DC management, or same with Disney, with Iger coming back. I don't think that's likely. It's not. They have bigger issues to address. But my question is there any scenario where one of the top dogs would actually take notice? Is there anything shy of actual loss that would make Zaslav send someone in to replace Jim Lee? Or is improving management a kind of it has to get darkest before dawn type situation? That's the mail. So what will it take? So let's look at the scenarios where corporate, higher people at Disney or Marvel would say, all right, we have to make some major changes. The most obvious one is that Jim Lee or David Gabriel or CB Cebulski or Tom Brevoort or Marie Javins or something like that. Somebody at a very, very high level at that company gets involved in a really, really bad scandal, meaning like a Bill Cosby date rape kind of scandal, that something that is impossible for people to ignore. This is a kind of thing that CNN and Fox, both different, and MSNBC, all different politically motivated channels, all of them start running stories about, this disgusting behavior that, somebody is up to. Like Jim Lee is found to, caught with children kind of thing. And it's the worst possible thing. And you can't be ignored. At that place, then corporate would basically take that moment, I think, to majorly shake up the companies. In Marvel's case, they would fold it into Disney Press and the licensing department there, and they would just kind of collapse Marvel as a standalone company. In DC or Warner's case, I think it would be a wholesale kind of change of management leadership. So a scandal. I think those are very unlikely. That's highly unlikely to actually occur. Jim Lee is not going to be found as a Zodiac killer anytime soon. So I think that's kind of unlikely. The other scenario people bring up, but I don't think it would still cause change, is if the company started losing tons and tons of money. First off, it would be very hard for them to lose money because they work in a corporation. When I say to lose money, I don't mean break even or even lose a little bit. I mean lose lots and lots of money, and here's why. Corporations tend to keep a decent leash on their subsidiaries, on their branches, and they're awarded or given budget every year in order to operate. And it's hard if you're Marvel, say, you couldn't go out there and spend an extra $1 billion without anybody noticing. That money just doesn't exist for you. You'd be able to spend the money that the corporation, meaning Disney, gave you. You could promise that you're going to make 10% and you actually lose 2%. But it'd be hard. I mean, put it this way: if Marvel at its current cap suddenly next year half of all the people who are currently buying their comics stop, they lose 50% of all the revenue that they're making on their comics. Even that impact, it's unlikely that Disney would step in and say we need to make some changes. I mean, and the odds of a company in year one losing 50% of the revenue from the previous year over 1 year, losing that volume, that's more catastrophic than you can imagine. I mean, sales don't just go off the cliff like that. They gradually decline. And at a corporation, when things are gradually declining, then what happens is they tighten belts, they reduce budgets, they say, all right, we're not giving you 20 million to spend next year, we're going to give you 18 because you're not meeting your numbers. So you're going to need to go and find some cheaper artists and writers and other ways to kind of make this happen. Or you're going to have to come up with some other ways to make some money, so print some other variants, whatever that happens to be. That's the current state of Marvel and DC. They're in that state where they're given some money. They're probably underperforming expectations, but at a corporate level, nobody really has expectations. Nobody at Disney or Warner going, if we just sunk a bunch of time and money into this comics thing, we could really dominate the entire market and do really well. Nobody is thinking like that. Anybody who's trying to make dollars at Disney in order to get notice and get their bonuses and get their promotions they're looking solidly at licensing and the movies. They're not looking at anything related to print. That they're just not. It's not their business. So I mean, maybe there is a world where there'd be a major shakeup if somebody brought a really good idea to corporate, but that really good idea has nothing to do with the quality of comics or who's working on them. It would be something along the lines of, Marvel goes to Disney corporate and says, hey, my idea is that we stop printing the comics completely ourselves, and we go sign a deal with Penguin Random House, and they will create the comics. Like they will we'll turn over all the editorial and everything to them, and they'll make them, and then we'll just license. We'll just license out. That's a scenario that could happen, and that's a scenario where corporate would take notice because suddenly it would change the very nature of their deal. But that's not likely to happen either. Penguin Random House is not in the business of wanting to take on that money because, I mean, the sad part is, even though Marvel and DC are cash flow positive, even though they are making a profit, it's not a big profit. And so in order to buy into that business, let's say that, when the rumors were that DC was up for sale and Warner, AT&T were kind of fishing around to see what people would sell. It was never a serious attempt to get somebody to buy the company because they knew they're basically validating something they already knew coming into it, which was, hey, would anybody out there be willing to spend $20 million in order to make $20.5 million? Yeah, that's profitable. But if you have $20 million to spend, you're probably going to invest it. You're going to put it other places. You're not going to buy something with such a low return. That would cost you money. And so that's kind of where things are sitting right now with comics. The odds of a big change happening are low. The odds of a slow incremental change happening is high. I think it's highly likely that you're just going to see parts of Marvel, parts of DC eventually parceled off, licensed, kind of the business contracting, until at some point the licensing becomes kind of perfunctory and the comics are just done that way and somebody else is dealing with it. This is the long, slow, agonizing death approach as opposed to a sudden change by corporate. To your point in the mail, the higher ups have bigger fish to fry and better revenue to chase. And then, so that's kind of where it sits. Anyway, thank you very much for the mail. Let me know if you think it's different. If you're one of those people who are like, Zaslav's going to come in and he's going to personally inspect all the books and make sure that God, I hope he's not doing that. I'm not a shareholder, but the odds of that happening are quite low. We're going to see slow change, not sudden change, which is the way it normally works. This isn't exactly a bold and daring prediction. Most change happens slow, which is kind of how the world works. Anyway, thanks for listening.